Hi, I'm Jeff Grubb. I'm over at Giant Bomb. I also do a podcast on Thursdays called Game Mess Decides, where me and Mike Minotti talk about the industry. We had a pretty big conversation on Thursday night on our last episode about Xbox, trying to diagnose what's going on over there in terms of what do they care about, what are the issues, what's the future, all those things. And that led us to kind of try to get into specific conversations about specific games and whether or not they are generating the revenue necessary. And what does that even mean at an Xbox that has cared about Game Pass for a very long time? Well, I noted that HiFi Rush did not make the money it needed to make. That was a mistake. I should have said that HiFi Rush was, cost this much and it made this much. I should have said it like that. And because I don't know what it needed to do. I've tried to be clear about that since, trying to clear things up, which is why I'm actually grateful that on Friday, after what I said became, a top story on Reddit, r/games and all that, and was trending on Twitter, Aaron Greenberg from Xbox came out and addressed this. He posted a tweet that basically just said, hey, the game did great in all the key metrics that we measure and all expectations, and we're happy with Tango Gameworks and HiFi Rush. I'm glad they did that because the story was becoming, based on what I said, but I didn't say this, but the story became HiFi Rush was a flop, a failure. And that's just not what I was going for at all. That's not what I was trying to say. I don't know what would have made that game a success in Microsoft's eyes. They're saying it is just without caveat. And I think it's clear that it was never going to be a traditional sort of measurement stick for that game because they did something new in terms of how they released it. They put it out as a shadow drop right after one of their shows where they didn't tease it at all. It was a complete surprise. And I think that puts it in a category where it's a bit of an experiment and they were trying to see what it can do. And at the end, the game got a ton of buzz. It got a ton of critical acclaim and a lot of fans talking about it. And it serves as this sort of platform that Tango Gameworks can jump off in the future to make something new again or make a follow-up. And I think that's why I'm glad that Aaron came out and said what he said, because Microsoft is happy with Tango Gameworks. I think that's clear. We could see that from the way that they are investing in the studio. They're doing more with them. So, man, that's where it got weird for me, because I feel terrible when things like this happen. I said something that it was like, kind of mostly off the cuff on the podcast. Not even really, we were just having a larger conversation, and I was trying to get to, here's what I know, and here's some things that we could figure out. And people take the tiny little detail and blow it up, and I feel terrible because I'm not sorry for necessarily like doing my job, but I do feel bad when I make like when I misspeak in a tiny way, and then the next morning I wake up and there's a bunch of headlines that kind of really run with that narrative. But I still want to do my job and try to talk these things out and say what I do know and try to bring truth to the podcast. But the people at Tango Gameworks don't deserve to go into their studio the next day reading those headlines and wondering, hey, I thought we were cool. Why am I reading that Microsoft thinks we're a failure and a flop? Now, of course, I didn't say those things again, but that's what they were reading, and that's where I feel bad. Now, what were we really trying to figure out? What were we really discussing with all this? It's just that HiFi Rush, yes, cost this much, and it made this much. And does that matter? Is a game like HiFi Rush going to feel more pressure for having that sort of return on traditional, traditional investment and traditional return of it cost this much money to make it, and now how much money is it getting back directly, as opposed to like what's it getting on Game Pass? And does the game feel like it, or does Microsoft feel like these games need to do more in a world where something like Halo did not make the money it needed to make? Now, that's not based on any insider information. We're looking at a game that, we can all anecdotally tell most people have stopped playing. Microtransactions are almost certainly not selling. And I think, the layoffs that happened, I think speak to that, right? I mean, we don't know exactly, but I think that's probably comes like, hey, this game's making this much and it costs this much. Can we get those numbers closer? Well, that's happening for Halo. So does that begin affecting some of these other projects? And I think, because the idea was that Game Pass was supposed to alleviate a lot of those concerns. Game Pass would keep growing, the subscription numbers would pay for a lot of this, and then the other thing that would pay for everything is a game like Halo would come out, and its microtransactions would be a massive success, and that would pay for a lot of stuff as well. So Halo's not living up to its side of that bargain, and Game Pass, well, we thought that was going to keep growing, but is it? Microsoft themselves have said it's 15% of their business, and it's not going to get to be much bigger than that. So is it going to keep growing? According to them, maybe not. So then where does that leave the rest of these games that need to, or do they need to hit a certain revenue bar? Or is it okay if they just get people, if they get players on Game Pass and they get some excitement and they do okay on Steam, is that enough? We don't know. That's what the conversation was really about. We tried to figure that out, tried to diagnose that. And I think there's sort of this back and forth where Microsoft doesn't even necessarily know itself where it's going to land on these things, because it's not sure where the ceiling is going to be for Game Pass. And it's not sure like what it's going to, like what the next game is going to make in terms of revenue. And so it's got to kind of feel these things out slowly over time. But again, that doesn't mean that HiFi Rush is a failure. And really, I don't think it means that Xbox is somehow failing or that they're going to pull the plug or sell off Xbox. I think they're pot committed for a long time. They are trying to figure out what makes sense. And there's still a lot of changes that need to be processed before they can even figure out where they're going to land. The Activision acquisition does seem like it's going to go through. And those games do make money. Call of Duty does generate a lot of revenue. Diablo is going to make a lot of money. World of Warcraft makes a lot of money every month. Those are things that could begin filling in the gaps. But to come back to sort of the genesis of this conversation, that those games coming in and making a lot of money doesn't really speak to what we were trying to talk to, which is the current Xbox set up in a way that it can make money from the studios it already has, and are those studios in a good position to do what they need to do to execute on whatever vision Microsoft has for the future, whether that is put out interesting games that get people excited about Game Pass. And if that's enough, that's enough. Or make games that make a lot of money by selling a lot of copies. You know, what's the future? It is a bit of a fork in the road, or you know, they're going to try to do both as much as they can, but these things are pulling in opposite directions somewhat. And that's the conversation we were trying to have. The whole idea that this became about HiFi Rush was very frustrating. It just was. That was never what this was supposed to be about. So I go back to, honestly, thanks, Aaron Green, for coming out and like squashing that side of things. I appreciate that. I'm going to stick to what I was trying to say originally. Just the game this much made this much. But does that matter? I don't think so. I don't think that matters, especially not for the current and future of Tango Gameworks specifically. They are, I think, in a really golden place for delivering a high quality game and then getting ready to maybe shift their focus from what they were doing before to a new Future of Tango Gameworks, where they're building on this sort of idea where, this game looking like this, like what can they do with the lessons they learned from HiFi Rush? They could do a lot of cool stuff. They could be the sort of premier Japanese studio at Microsoft. I think their position is very rock solid. And frankly, I couldn't be more excited because I love HiFi Rush and I love Tango Gameworks. I want to see what they're going to do next. Now, I know everything I've said is not going to alleviate the anxieties that a lot of Xbox fans have, but that's not my job. Just like when I feel terrible that what I say can affect game developers, I don't work for them. That's not my job. I need to write for the audience. And so, and I need to, do my podcast for the audience. That's who I work for. So that's who I'm going to speak to. And I'm going to, be duty bound to tell them the truth. Even if that can cause problems sometimes. But just because I speak to the audience and I want to write to the audience, I want to do a podcast toward the audience, does not mean I am going to cater or pander. I'm just not going to do that. And one thing that I never want to see in my mentions again is someone telling me, don't speak critically about Xbox because it'll be used against Xbox. That is not my problem. It's not my intention. I'm not trying to cause these issues. I had no idea that this HiFi Rush story was going to blow up the way it did. If I could predict what was going to happen with that stuff, I would make a lot more money. Just frankly, I would make a lot more money than I make. So trust me when I'm like, I'm just doing my podcast the way I'm always going to do it. If I could, I can't change if I wanted to. This is the way I'm going to do it. So yeah, if that's bothersome, if you don't want to listen to that anymore, I just suggest moving on, go watch someone else's show. But I'm going to keep doing it the way I'm doing it. I want to thank everybody who's been so kind and just always tuning in. And the people that always show up always know what I'm trying to say. And I appreciate y'all. And then for everyone else, thanks for watching. Thanks for, humoring me as I sort of ramble through this. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself and goodbye.